China's milk scandal claims more lives. IBM and Volvo forced to unionize. Two-thirds of Coca-Cola's Chinese suppliers fail audits. Dell makes cheaper computers for India and China. Welcome to Operations Asia. I'm your host, Sunny Pan, coming to you directly from our production studios in Shanghai, bringing you the latest operations news from the Asian region. In the latest product scandal in China, 54,000 infants are sick and others have died. Local stations which collect fresh milk from farmers have been blamed for adding melamine to substandard or watered-down milk. Over 22 companies have been implicated in the scandal, including New Zealand dairy giant Fonterra. Shares of Mengniu and other leading dairies have plunged more than two-thirds due to the scandal. IBM and Volvo are among the latest companies in China that plan to set up trade unions. Less than half of Fortune 500 firms in China have done so. To rectify the situation, the top unions launched a 3-month national campaign in June. In 2006, the unions made a breakthrough when Walmart, which had no unions anywhere in the world, began setting them up. Under a new agreement, Walmart employees will get 8% pay raises this year and next. The contracts introduce wage negotiations and agreements on working hours, paid vacations, and social security. Coca-Cola, a major sponsor of the Beijing Olympics, said recently two-thirds of its suppliers in China last year were not compliant with company policies on things like workers' rights and the environment. The soft drink giant said it had targets to bring errant suppliers up to standards, arguing in its 2007 sustainability report that working with them was better than cutting them off. Coke said two-thirds of its Chinese suppliers it uses for things like packaging and ingredients fail to comply with principles implemented in 2003 to promote respect for labor rights among its global business partners. Dell recently unveiled 4 low-cost computer models for China and India. The new PCs are the first Dell models designed especially for emerging markets. Dell built its U.S. business with internet and phone-based direct sales, but has added retail distribution in China and elsewhere to reach more buyers. In China, Dell computers are sold at 2,700 outlets of Guomei and Suning stores, which account for about half of Dell's Chinese sales. Dell has a total of 13,000 retail outlets worldwide. After surging to dominate world markets, China's textile industry is losing its competitive advantage. The industry is facing RMB appreciation, higher costs of fuel, electricity, and chemicals, as well as a cut in domestic tax rebates. New labor laws from January 2008 have also eaten away margins and forced manufacturers to comply with stricter regulations. Some low-end operations are moving to emerging markets such as India, Pakistan, Vietnam, and Cambodia, while other textile factories have shut down completely. Today, I'm joined by 3 guests to discuss these issues. Via video link, we're joined by Benoit Majeret, General Manager of Look Shanghai, a textiles manufacturer that produces more than 25 million pieces of garments for export every year for customers such as Disney and Time Warner. In Hong Kong, via telephone, we are joined by Alex Angelchik, President of New Times Development. New Times is one of the largest sourcing companies in the world for apparel, handling accounts like Polo Ralph Lauren. And in Wenzhou, also via video link, we are joined by Lelio Gavasa, General Manager and Export Sales Director at Shamoon Xenia, a joint venture garment manufacturer. All right, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Sunny.
Good evening, Sunny.
To begin with, Benoit, have you been affected by rising costs in your business?
Definitely, we have seen big changes in the last 2 years due to different factors. I think, of course, the exchange rate in the US dollar and RMB has affected us by about 20% surcharge. Then we had a change in the tax rebate policy, and also the new labor law that will be implemented has raised the labor cost definitely.
All right, then what about you, Alex?
We've been affected, I think, like everyone else has. I mean, it's been difficult because there's been an increase in textiles, there's been an increase in trim costs, there's been an increase in what we call cut and make costs, packaging costs, transportation costs, and for the preceding period of a few years, the manufacturers were willing to absorb much of the increased costs so they wouldn't lose business. But it seems like this year the manufacturers could no longer absorb those costs. Additionally, there's been a lot of manufacturers who have gone out of business, so the manufacturers who have remained strong have a lot of business because they've taken on the overflow from those other companies, and they're able to call the shots more than before.
Lelio, I know your company is a little bit different. Charmoon, Zegna focuses more on high-end garments. Do you have the same problem?
Yes, of course we are facing this problem in these days, and of course it's something that we are going to facing as well next year. We apply all the requests that the government asked us to implement within this year with the new labor contract. We are increasing the cost, but the majority of the activity has been done by Charmoon IZ in the last few years. So today we are facing a cost increase, but the cost increase is not so big as for all the other Chinese companies.
But in this kind of environment, are you able to stay competitive?
Well, we had, of course, as everybody else, we have competition around the world. And on our markets, mainly in Europe and Russia, we had to remain competitive. We had no choice but to move part of our production to other Asian countries.
We stay competitive by helping our customers develop better product. You know, and I always say this, product that is designed well, that hits a sweet spot, you know, in the consumer's heart, is still selling, and selling well. So we help our customers kind of get to that sweet spot. We provide them with textile assistance, design assistance, choosing the right trims, and making sure that the products are manufactured properly. The communication between the factory and our group and the customer is smooth and accurate. And of course, on-time delivery is essential in this market.
We hear a lot of factories are moving outside of China. Have you considered this?
We are not really looking at market outside of China. We are based in China, we are based in Wenzhou, and we are going to serve, and we serve in the past, all the top-level customer. Our customers are really willing to have a high-quality product, and they are not so willing to receive only lower cost production. This means that we focus a lot of attention in the quality of the product, and we don't need at this day to find alternative source for finding lower production cost.
As I mentioned before, we moved our production, part of our production out of China to be able to compete on the global market. And this shift is not a small thing, since about 40% of our production has moved out of China within 2 years.
Who are China's biggest threats in terms of grabbing market share?
We've seen in the last 2 years a greater shift to countries like Vietnam, the second largest exporter of apparel to the United States. You know, and I mean that's a phenomenal growth for Vietnam in the last 5 years. No one would have expected it would have grown so quickly. But because of quota uncertainties in China, because of cost of labor in China, people have moved to Vietnam.
As far as I can see now, I would say India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia would be the 3 main sources at this point. Bangladesh is an attractive place today for several reasons. Number one, the currency linked to the US dollar, which means that the depreciation of the US dollar has increased their competitiveness by about 20%. We also have a favored treatment from European countries on all imports from textile import from Bangladesh. They have no duty compared to about 10 to 12% for Chinese imports. And the last thing would be the export tax that is imposed on Chinese export that we don't have in Bangladesh. By moving to Bangladesh, we are about saving 40% on our sourcing cost.
Alex, Benoit, and Lelio, thank you for being with us today.
Okay, thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, Sunny. It was my pleasure.
The chemical industry is an important link in the global supply chain, providing numerous value-added products and services. Russell Barron has looked further into the challenges currently facing the industry, focusing on one key player, Dow Chemical.
With demand for chemicals in China expected to double between 2002 and 2015, the country's chemical industry represents an attractive opportunity, greatly facilitated since China joined the World Trade Organization at the end of 2001. As many multinational companies struggle amidst a volatile global economy and finding the right plan for China, the Dow Chemical Company's China strategy appears to be paying off. So far, Dow has invested over $500 million in Greater China and earmarked another $400 million for new manufacturing and R&D facilities. Dow has had a long presence in China, first arriving in the 1930s and then officially entering the mainland in the early 1980s.
In the 1980s, mainly we are competing with multinationals. Okay, you can name it as mainly multinationals from Europe and from the United States. And as we evolve, then we have local Asians coming in, mainly the Japanese. And then later on, you have the Koreans. And then now we are facing competition from local Chinese competitors as well as competitors from the Middle East.
In line with China's ongoing push up the value chain, away from low-end consumer products to more sophisticated and higher-end products, the competitive landscape has changed.
The Chinese government is encouraging value-added manufacturing rather than low-value assembly or piecework manufacturing, and chemicals fits very well with this.
The chemical giant, which prides itself on its commitment to human progress through the harnessing of science and technology, has big plans for China.
China is currently our third largest global market, and we expect within 10 years it will be the second largest, surpassing Germany, and within 20 years it will become our largest global market, surpassing the United States.
With an eye to the future, many multinationals are shifting their global R&D investments to China.
Globally, Dow spends more than $1 billion a year on research and development.
When Dow opens their new facility in Zhangjiagang, over 600 engineers will be doing research for the global market. But are Chinese companies offering real competition?
If you look at from the commodity product perspective, I think the Chinese are as good as making the same product as most of the multinational. I think the thing is that you look at the market-facing end, which is the more value-added end. I think because this is all technology-driven and R&D driven. So this is where the Chinese competitor is, I would say, a little bit lacking.
Dow is a good example of a company with a clear long-term plan and execution strategy for China, which, as some companies have found out, is necessary for success in such a dynamic market.
To be number one, it doesn't mean that you have the number one sales in the world. You basically need to have the capability, the competency, and also the asset in place to be in that number one position.
China's automotive sector has been eyed greedily the world over. Automakers, suppliers, and many others are looking to benefit from the ongoing surge in consumer demand for cars in China. To get more insight, let's cross live to the Hyatt on the Bund in downtown Shanghai, where Max Henry from the Global Supply Chain Council has gathered several experts to discuss the issues. Hi Max, are you having fun there?
Things are great, thank you, Sunny. We are today very glad to be on the Hyatt on the Bund with a fantastic view on the Huangpu River. Joining us today, we have three guests. I'm very pleased to introduce you Jan Teste, who is the Head of Purchasing East Asia of Knorr Brands Truck Division. We also have Duan Bollinger, who is the General Manager of BBK Consulting, and Marnix Etema, who is the Senior Manager of Alvarez and Massal. All right, so you guys are top expert in the automotive sector here in China. What are, according to, to your knowledge and your experience, what are the main issues right now happening in supply chain management for, for those OEM manufacturers and also the tier 1 suppliers here?
If I might, from my point of view, the main challenge we have is to maintain cost under control, and reliability of quality, and then a sustainable supply chain and relationship with the suppliers.
What we see here in China is clearly, like Jan said, is a lot of cost pressure, rising material cost, the new labor law and rising cost of labor, VAT regulations that have changed. We see a rise, of course, in the transportation cost, especially for the exporting companies. And at the same time that we see all these cost pressures, of course, we see for the exporting companies a decline of the US market. And this brings quite a number of the automotive suppliers in China in a squeeze. And they're looking for creative ways to restore their margins and their volumes.
What are those measures that those companies you think are taking right now to to counter impact what's going on?
I think, and Dwayne already touched on that, a lot of companies start to look at best practices. I think a lot of companies have in the last 5 to 10 years grown very, very rapidly, and a lot of management attention was on increasing the capacity and the volume to serve these booming markets. And right now they can take a step back, they have to take a step back and say, hey, how do we actually things in an optimal way? Let's look at some global best practices and bring them into our operations and in the way we work with our customers and our partners.
Yeah, and I'd say, and you guys, I think, have seen maybe some recent surveys where most multinational companies would acknowledge that they really hadn't implemented best practices. And I don't know that it was they were too busy. I would say they were happy with the low labor cost, and I think given inflation here over the last couple of years, it's forced those companies to rethink implementing best practices, supply chain management, lean manufacturing principles, Six Sigma problem-solving techniques.
You see the benefits out of that? Because from my point of view, I don't see such a benefit of such best practices at this moment. I think it's very advanced, lean manufacturing is very advanced practice, but actually here in China, I don't see so much suppliers able to deploy that correctly so that I have an instant effect. What I can see is that they choose their customers. So if you're not interesting, then they jump to another customer. That's what I can see. But perhaps my volumes are not so interesting for them. I don't know. But lean manufacturing, I don't know what you're going to win. Yeah?
Lean is working in China, or does that because
no?
Does that work?
No, but I'll respond back to your comment on. I would acknowledge as well that there's not too many people here within a lot of companies, multinational companies, I'll say in particular, local, certainly none, of the right talent that could implement lean principles. And not only just at the working level, but it starts at the top as well.
But lean, you're going to work on a part of the cost which is quite little, right? Because here you have major part of your cost breakdown is material. And then what is the rest is quite a profit, certainly a lot, and the rest is only a small part of it. So I'm not sure what it's going to bring if the guys can deploy it correctly.
But from a lean standpoint, I'll start with it includes material flow. So you get at issues that I think we would all acknowledge are a part of inherent here in China, as well as information flow. The information flowing from you to your suppliers to their suppliers. Lean's beyond just looking in your own plant and trying to identify ways to take out kind of the obvious waste.
Whatever countries that you think, and I will go to all of you, you think can help China?
So Vietnam was the focus. It was a little bit the hype at this moment, and I know that you are also quite active in Vietnam now, and some other companies also. Though people, or let's say my colleagues, are getting a little bit frightened by the inflation rate over there.
28%?
Yeah, so
30%.
But still, it doesn't mean that you are directly impacted by it when you buy a specific component to a specific place, to a specific supplier. So Vietnam, yes, is a place. We have a structure in India, and India is very competitive also. So I think it's an excellent alternative if your company can make a benchmark between India and China, and at the same time has something in place in Mexico for the North American factories, and in Central East Europe. So if you are in a global company with such places where you can make sourcing, actually, I think you're quite complete in your scope. And yeah, that's what we have actually. So we have structures in each of the...
I'd be interested to know, Jan, is Vietnam, for a company like yours, the product you're looking for and the volumes you're looking for, is Vietnam a realistic option, a realistic alternative to China?
Actually, we have some about $6 to $7 million US export from Vietnam. So it shows that it's quite it's reliable and it's a good place to purchase. We are buying there since a little bit more than eight years. Okay. So it is said that it could be an alternative, but again, it depends of your specifics, what you're going to buy.
My guess is though, if your industry is very labor intensive, or if the products that you're buying are very labor intensive, those companies have probably moved out of China several years ago. Into Vietnam, India, Indonesia, probably in that order. But I'd still say, in fact, I saw some recent data that suggested that roughly, 75% of all the multinational companies here are going to stay here and have no plans to leave. So I'd suggest that there's tremendous sourcing opportunities that continue to be right here in China. There's, as we talked earlier, there's lots of opportunity to take cost out. While I think the automotive industry has experienced some tremendous price pressures over the last couple years, I think there's lots of opportunities for them to mitigate those pressures through best practices.
Okay. From automotive and mechanical parts point of view, I think this is the best place actually. Yeah. Even if okay, that's also I'm speaking for, I'm preaching for my own church, I would say, but if you make the balance between technology, low cost, and quality, I would say that's the best place
I'd agree.
at this moment.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today's discussion. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. Back to you, Sunny.
Thank you, Max. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the auto sector in the next few years. Well, that does it for this week's edition of Operations Asia. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be taking an in-depth look at the latest logistics industry innovations in China.